Our speaker tonight is Eve Grayson. She's the Trust's Living Seas Engagement Officer, and it may well be that you've met Eve on the various coastal events that the Trust has been holding, but tonight she's in indoor mode, talking about seagrass. And seagrass has been described as the ugly stepchild of marine organisms. But I guarantee that after the talk this evening, we will all agree that that's far from the case and that it deserves so much better attention. So, seagrass, meadows of the sea. Eve, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Jeff. Hello, welcome everybody. If you see me suddenly look over at my screen and pause a little bit, it's because I'm trying to admit people into this Zoom meeting. So I'll share my screen with you all, and there we go. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Right, Jeff, can you see that? Is that okay? You got that, Jeff?
I've not in full
Is that better?
screen.
That's it.
That's it, yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you. And I'm just going to try and do this. Oh, hang on, I don't want to do that. Sorry, just bear with me whilst I Is this going to work?
Yeah. Lovely pictures.
Yeah. Can you just see this text as well?
No.
Oh, you can't? Okay, that's good. So you can just see, you can just see the picture.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm just gonna really quickly check to see if, oh, hang on, there's a chat button as well. Sorry, it's been a while since, oh, brilliant, thank you. People are saying that they can see it. Fantastic. And there's somebody else waiting in the waiting room. I'll just let them in. Okay. So welcome everybody. Croeso. As Jeff was saying, my name is Eve Grayson. I'm the engagement officer for Living Seas Wales. And if any of you haven't come into contact with our project before, it's a partnership project between the North Wales Wildlife Trust and the Wildlife Trust for South and West Wales. So between both of our trusts, we cover pretty much the whole coast of Wales. So it's all about raising the marine profile around Wales, about the marine environment. And there's three of us working on the project. So as Jeff said, I do the engagement work. So that's things like Rockpool Rambles. We do an event with Anglesey Branch called Picnic with a Porpoise, which is a very popular event. Kayak safaris, that kind of thing, and talks like this one as well. My colleague Dawn, she does a lot of work with community, like a community of volunteers to carry out surveys, beach cleans, and she basically supports our beach guardians in whatever way she can. There's a part of the project which is called The Sea and Me, and that's all about collating and recording historical memories of the sea. Because there's a lot of anecdotal evidence and history that is going to be lost with people. So we're really keen to document and record that, and we've been doing that with People's Collection Wales. So we've got a page on their website where a lot of these memories are being uploaded to. And then there's Nia as well, who I need to mention. So she's our project manager, and she oversees the whole project. She does a lot of work with policy, and as it's a 3-year project and it's coming to the end at the end of January, she's in the moment busy trying to secure some funding so that we can carry on delivering the work that we do. So that's a bit about the project and where I come from. And so on to the subject of seagrass. Sorry, I'm just going to really quickly just check there's somebody else in the waiting room. I'm just going to let them in. There we go. So onto the subject of seagrass. So our project hasn't necessarily focused that much on seagrass in the past, but I've been wanting to do a talk about it for quite a long time, because it really is the unsung hero of the marine world. Coral reefs get a lot of press because they're colourful and they're beautiful and they're blooming with wildlife, but seagrass supports just as much wildlife as coral reefs, but it just doesn't get the recognition. So what is seagrass? Well, to confuse you all, it isn't a grass at all. It gets its name from the long grass-like stems that it has, but they are actually the only flowering plant that is able to live in seawater. So they pollinate whilst they're actually submerged. And you can actually see in this photo here, you can see the bits of seagrass around this beautiful spiny seahorse here. And it has the capability to grow in really large, dense areas, and it gives the appearance of a terrestrial grassland or an underwater meadow. And for those of you terrestrial people that know that in a meadow on land, that lots of grass isn't actually very good, so we want lots of flowers, and it's exactly the same in the sea. It really is just incredible, and it provides some of the world's most productive and ecologically significant marine ecosystems. So we've already established that it isn't a grass, and being a flowering plant, it's not an algae either, so the two often get confused. Algae is a very simple plant. It has no flowers or veins. It's got holdfasts that simply attach to the bottom. So as you can see in the image here, it's attached to a rock. Quite often see that. And it's generally not specialised to take in nutrients. But in contrast, you can see the seagrass on the right here. It is an angiosperm, so it's a true flowering plant. It's got leaves and roots and veins, and it produces flowers and seeds. It's got chloroplasts in the tissues, and that they use the sun's energy to convert carbon dioxide and water. Oh, I just got to admit somebody, sorry. And water into sugar and oxygen for growth, and then through the process of photosynthesis. Veins can transport the nutrients and water throughout the plant, and it's also got these little air pockets, and that helps to keep the leaves buoyant in the water column. And they also exchange carbon dioxide throughout the plant. So just like flowering plants, as you can see here, it's got roots and rhizomes, and these absorb nutrients just like flowering plants on land. However, unlike flowering plants, they lack stomata. So stomata are the tiny pores on leaves that open and close to control the water and gas exchange. So instead, they've got a very thin cuticle layer, and that allows gases and nutrients to diffuse directly in and out of the leaves from the water. So the roots of the seagrass, they extend into the sediment on the seafloor, and they are used to store and absorb nutrients as well as to anchor the plants to the bed. And the really interesting thing about seagrass is that it obviously evolved from algae to land plants, and then it moved back to the water around 75 to 100 million years ago. It moved back from land to water, and it's changed relatively little since then. So it's been around a very long time. So this image here is taken from space, and it's just to give you an idea of the scale that seagrass beds can grow in. So here's the Red Sea. This is a place called the Al-Waj Bank in Saudi Arabia. So it's the north coast of the Red Sea. So we've got the Red Sea, there's some islands highlighted there, you can see the sort of sandy islands, and there are the seagrass beds. So, you know, they're very, very dense and they're very large. And this image is really good because it also highlights the conditions that seagrass really likes to grow in. So very shallow base, so it grows and it likes to grow in quite shallow water, and this is because it needs to photosynthesize. So the sunlight needs to penetrate the water to be able to get to the leaves to photosynthesize. And you can see here the water's pretty clear as well. and that's a really good condition for seagrass to grow in. And being protected from wave action also really helps the seagrass beds as well. So the Red Sea is very sheltered and it has very limited wave action. And there are 60 species of seagrass known globally, and 12 are found within the Red Sea, and that's the highest seagrass diversity of anywhere in the world. And we're still finding new species of seagrass in the Red Sea, so there's still a lot to be explored. But in Wales, this was in 2019, this was created, and there, as you can see here, there's 10 seagrass sites known throughout Wales. The majority of these are found in bays, inlets and estuaries, so quite sheltered. We have 2 species of seagrass, recognised species of seagrass found in Wales. So the first of these is dwarf eelgrass. This is Zostra knoltii. And this is generally found in the intertidal zone. So that means that they're periodically exposed to air, either partially or completely, depending on the tide. And the other species that we have is Zostra marina, so that's common eelgrass, and that's generally a subtidal species. And that means that they're always covered by water. You might have heard of other species that are associated with seagrass. So widgeon grass, which is the rupia species, that's also found in Wales, and it's not strictly considered to be a seagrass because it actually grows in more sort of brackish water. But it is commonly grouped with the Zostra species because it can occupy quite a similar niche. So that's currently what we have documented in Wales. And looking at the image, it would, you'd kind of think that these are the only these are the only places that have conditions that would allow seagrass to grow, but that isn't the case. We actually have a lot more. There are a lot more areas where seagrass could grow. It's just that it has disappeared from there. So why is it so important? Well, stabilising sediments. These extensive rhizomes, they weave together underneath the seabed, and they help to stabilise the sand and the mud that they grow on. And it's really important because it prevents the seabed from being washed away in currents and potentially smothering other wildlife. So that's particularly important in places where there are coral reefs and seagrass growing adjacent to coral reefs. Then it really helps to kind of keep the coral reefs clean. It improves the water clarity. So part of the stabilising sediments helps to improve the water clarity, but it also filters the water as well. Provides a really good nursery habitat for a lot of juvenile fish. And actually, it's estimated that seagrass beds supply at least 20% of the world's fisheries. So economically for us, it's a really important habitat as well. Biodiversity, it's an incredible and really important habitat for biodiversity. Seagrass meadows provide food and habitat for thousands of species. Elsewhere in the world, animals like manatees and sea turtles just wouldn't really be able to survive without the habitat. So it is really important. There's around 30 times more animals living in seagrass compared to adjacent sandy habitats. So it is really important. So we're going to move on to just some of the species that you might see if you were in North Wales, if you were snorkeling in North Wales or diving around a seagrass bed. Some of the species that are quite important, really, that it provides a home for. So this here is a stalked jellyfish. They have a sucker that attaches to a marine plant, and you can see here it's attached to some seagrass. And although it's distantly related to the jellyfish, it isn't actually a jellyfish, even though it's called a jellyfish. It can't follow prey because, as you can see, it's stuck, and it uses its tentacles to catch small fish, shellfish sometimes, and it has this ability to spit out the shells after it's finished eating the actual the bit that it gets the most nutrient from. Seagrass is an absolutely perfect habitat for stalk jellyfish because there's plenty of food floating by, and it's very sheltered. This is called a greater pipefish. You can see it's surrounded by seagrass plants. We have 6 species of pipefish in the UK. You can see it does look a little bit, its head looks a little bit like a seahorse. They are actually related to the seahorse, but they're also slightly different. And they eat mostly tiny crustaceans and feed on fish eggs and very small juvenile fish. So again, seagrass is a perfect habitat because, as I said earlier, you know, it's a great nursery ground for juvenile fish. So pipefish do very well in seagrass. This is a snake slox anemone. They mostly eat plankton, but they are capable of eating other things that are caught in their stinging cells, including fairly big fish. And if any of you have ever been rock pooling and found one of these, if you run your finger through the tentacles, it's quite sticky. And these are actually the stinging cells. So that's what it uses to catch its prey. So to us, it just feels maybe like running your finger along a little bit of Velcro or something like that. But actually, you're under quite a vicious attack. This here is this is a place. Again, this is just indicating that seagrass is a really important habitat for juvenile fish, particularly for flatfish. Hermit crabs. Hermit crabs, so generally smaller hermit crabs you'll find in seagrass beds. So they'll crawl along the seabed and they will eat any decomposing material or animal matter that they come across. They have the ability to filter feed, so they can consume plankton and other microscopic sea creatures. And as they grow, most of you probably know this, but as they grow, they leave their original shell and they go in search of a larger home. So generally smaller hermit crabs, around 1 centimetre or so in length, can be found in the intertidal zone. So smaller hermit crabs can be found, you know, around shallower areas, seagrass beds. But as they get bigger, they can go deeper into the sea, and they can go to depths of around 200 metres. They're opportunistic scavengers, and they'll feed on anything that they can find, really. So that's the hermit crab, again surrounded by seagrass. This here is a cuttlefish. They're absolutely beautiful animals, and it's believed that cuttlefish lay their eggs in seagrass beds. They're really impressive predators, and they can catch very large, fast-moving prey like fish and crustaceans, crabs and shrimps and prawns. And they've got these extendable tentacles that you can just see at the front of its eye there. They've got these extendable tentacles, and they use these to catch prey as it moves past. But hidden beneath those tentacles, they've got a razor-sharp beak, which is a bit similar to a parrot's beak. And it enables them to feed on hard-shelled animals like crabs. And when they bite into them, it induces this toxin, which quickly immobilizes any sort of troublesome prey. They'll typically spend the winter in deeper waters, and then in the spring and summer, they'll move close to shore into places like seagrass beds to lay their eggs. So along with the squid and the octopus, they're in a group called cephalopods. And that means head foot, basically, because they've got their tentacles on their head. So all species within the cephalopod group have their tentacles. That means that they've got their feet attached to their head, basically. But there are actually definitely, it's not too bad having, oh, sorry, I've skipped on a bit. it's not too bad having your foot attached to your head, because there's plenty of other marine animals that have got worse things attached to their head. And if any of you haven't seen the film called My Octopus Teacher, I would definitely recommend seeing it, because cephalopods, octopus, squid, and cuttlefish are very, very intelligent creatures. And again, this is about an octopus, and it's definitely worth watching. This is a long-spined sea scorpion fish. It's a really aggressive ambusher. Again, it'll eat things like prawns, small fish, such as gobies or blennies. And as you can see from the photo, the seagrass bed is absolutely perfect for ambushing. And it also looks really quite well camouflaged on the sandy floor as well. So it'd be a really good hunting ground for it. So looking at this photo, this is a bed of seagrass. It looks quite bare, just like lots of strands of green really to the naked eye. But if you spent just a small amount of time there, you'd quickly start to see juvenile fish, crustaceans, starfish, urchins, nudibranchs, which they're a sea slug. And they're not anything like your average garden slug. So if we move on to this, so this is a very colourful nudibranch. It's called a slim aesop, and it's searching for its food by climbing on this blade of seagrass. And this seagrass here is Zostra marina, so that's the common eelgrass. And if we look just a little closer at that blade of seagrass, you can see that it's absolutely teeming with life. So there's worms, there's crustaceans, there's microalgae at the bottom, and that sort of patchy white stuff, that's microalgae. And then at the top, there's hydroids that they sort of look like that filamentous things coming off the very top of the blade. So hydroids are, for those of you that don't know what they're actually animals. They're a colony of zooids, lots of tiny little animals that are stuck together and working together. And most hydroids are colonial, but they're exactly what this nudibranch will be looking for. Basically, it'll be going up and down this blade, hunting these out and eating them. And if any of you have seen recently, there's been a lot of Portuguese man of war washing up recently, and they are actually also a hydrozoa. A lot of people think that they do look very much like a jellyfish. A lot of people think that they are a jellyfish, but they're also in the hydrozoa group. So lots of zooids in a colony working together. So yeah, as you can see, a blade of seagrass serves as a refuge. A really good habitat of nourishment for lots of organisms. And the seahorse, we're onto the seahorse. So this is the short-snouted seahorse. Its name is Hippocampus hippocampus, which is a fantastic name. And we actually also have a hippocampus in our brain, if you're thinking that you'd recognise that name before. And bizarrely, it looks almost identical to a seahorse. So if any of you are interested, look it up, because it's quite impressive to see a little seahorse in our brains. But seahorses they're very poor swimmers. To swim, they rely on a very small dorsal fin at the back, and it flaps between 30 and 70 times per second. So it needs to flap a lot, basically. So seagrass beds are absolutely ideal for them because they're very private, very, very shy, and it provides shelter, something to cling on. So they use this, and you can see at the bottom of that photo this beautiful prehensile tail that wraps around things. This isn't actually seagrass, it's actually on some algae, but as you can see, that tail wrapping around it and keeping them in one place. And they're constantly eating, so they're using up a lot of energy flapping this fin, and so they have to constantly eat. So again, seagrass beds is just continuous nourishment for them, basically. They plankton and small crustaceans. So that's one type of seagrass, seahorse that we have. And this is the other. So this is the long-snouted or spiny seahorse, and this one's called Hippocampus gutulatus. And it's got this really obvious fleshy spine on its back. So that's where spiny seahorse comes from. They're also very poor swimmers, and you can see this one's using its tail to wrap around a blade of seagrass to stop it being swept away. And they don't have any teeth, seahorse, so they simply just use their snout just to suck up their, you know, small shrimps or plankton. And one really happy story to emerge from the first COVID lockdown was that at Studland Bay down in Dorset, there's a seagrass bed there, and that had actually visibly started to repair itself due to a reduction in the number of boats and people in the area. And this gave an opportunity for the spiny seahorse, for this seahorse, to take advantage. So there'd been no sightings of this creature in the last 2 years, and then on a recent dive this year there were 16 recorded in just one dive, and that's the largest number since 2008. So it's really positive because it shows just how quickly, you know, given a chance, just how quickly the seagrass beds and the wildlife within it can recover. And there's just a little message from Lucy saying that's amazing. It really is. It's quite incredible. So carbon sequestration, that is another really important thing that we are, you know, more recently that we've learned about in terms of how important seagrass beds are for sequestering carbon. It captures carbon around 35 times faster than rainforest, and it covers just 0.1% of the ocean floor, but it's responsible for about 12% of the blue carbon. So that's the organic carbon buried and stored in the ocean. But currently we're losing about 7%, or at least 7% of seagrass globally. You know, so there's a lot of effort going into how do we look after and try and restore some of this habitat. So the previous slide indicating that, you know, restoring it down in Dorset has been quite quick. Well, that's a really positive sign for us. The plants themselves have an excellent capacity for taking up and storing carbon, because the seabed is very depleted in oxygen, so it decomposes much slower than on land. And the oxygen-free sediments traps the carbon in the dead plant material, and then that can stay buried for hundreds of years. There are a lot of factors that influence the exact amount of carbon that can be taken up by a seagrass meadow, but rough calculations show that if we restored just 1 hectare, it would correspond to the same amount of carbon sequestration as between 10 and 40 hectares of dry woodland. So that's, you know, comparatively, that's quite a lot, really. Environmental health is also another thing that, again, we are just beginning to sort of touch the surface on, really. So in 2010, I quite like this story, it's very interesting. In 2010, there was a team of scientists from Cornell University, and they went to Indonesia to study coral reefs. The entire team came down with dysentery, and one person came down with typhoid. And so they tested the water, and when they tested it, they found that it contained this Enterococcus bacteria, and it contained 10 times the level that was deemed to be considered safe. So bizarrely, they returned in 2014. I don't think I'd go back there, but they decided to go back and do some more investigations. And they tested over 8,000 sites and of coral reefs, some adjacent to seagrass beds and some not. The ones that were found adjacent to seagrass beds had 50% less abundance of bacterial pathogens, a twofold reductions in diseased coral reefs. So the seagrass beds were found to be really promoting the health of the coral reefs. And these diseases and pathogens don't just affect the coral reefs, they affect humans as well. So it's not just marine life it affects, it has an impact on human life as well. And they believed that it was the oxygen that was being released from the seagrass. So there was this fizzing in the water. It's a bit like champagne bubbling, and they believed that this actually was able to kill some of the pathogens in the water. And the fungi that grows with the seagrass contains these bacteria killing compounds. So, in terms of environmental health, it's looking like it's also really important for marine and human health. Unfortunately, we can't do a talk without this part because it is conservation and can't just all be lots of nice, lovely photos. So we've got to do this bit as well, I'm afraid, but we'll try and get through it. So natural threats and destruction. There is grazing of seagrass. So wildfowl graze it. Widgeon notoriously grazes it at low tide. And then urchins as well. So, other marine creatures, but urchins can be a real problem. And in Australia, there was actually some restrictions lifted on harvesting sea urchins, and that's specifically to try and protect the seagrass because there was so overgrazing by sea urchins. And storms and wave action, that's another thing. So it's quite interesting because seagrass actually displays quite a high plasticity in terms of how it adapts to changing environmental conditions. And there's a lot of feedback loops that are linked to seagrass beds. So a large healthy seagrass bed will actually protect against storm and wave damage because the leaves can absorb the wave energy and it slows the flow of water. But a small fragmented habitat of seagrass bed will actually not be able to cope with the energy of storm and wave action, and it can end up destroying it further. So, you've got these different positive and negative feedbacks going on. Damage from boats. So this is moving on to the human destruction of seagrass beds, which is the real culprit of why we've lost so many seagrass beds. So you can clearly see here there's a big scar across this seagrass bed, which is most likely from a boat propeller. You can see how shallow that column of water is, so you can actually see the surface. And because seagrass is in such a shallow, it likes growing in shallow waters, it actually leaves itself quite open and vulnerable to destruction. And this is a video I want to try and show you. This will work. Oh. Right. So he's holding up, there's a starfish there. And there you go, that's the anchor moving moving through the water. And there's a seagrass bed. I hope you can all see this.
Sorry, we can't see it.
Oh, you can't? Oh!
No, afraid not.
It might have
Thanks.
opened in another window.
Oh, thanks for letting me know. Hang on. Hang on, let me just see if... Oh, I don't know how to do that. I'll tell you what I'll do. I will... Oh, hang on. There we go. New share. Is that it?
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Oh, is that it? Brilliant. Fantastic. I'll just put it back. Is that working? Yeah.
Yes, that's fine.
Oh, brilliant. So it's just kind of, you know, actually being able to see visually this anchor just being dragged through the seagrass bed. Is quite, I don't know, it's just quite impressive, really. I don't know if impressive is the right word for it, but and all of the sand, you know, everything being churned up, that's really not very healthy for the seagrass bed either. That will massively reduce light levels and the ability for the seagrass to photosynthesize. In fact, it just looks like there's a blade of seagrass just floating up at the top there, just floating off. Right, I need to figure out how to get back onto, there we go. Are we back on? Sorry, hang on. Sorry, bear with me 1 minute. Okay, sorry about that. I didn't pause YouTube, so it went on to another video. Right, I'll just quickly get back into this mode. Yeah, the wonders of technology, eh? There we go. Right, okay. I hope you can all see that now. And there's lots of...
No, afraid not.
Oh, you can't? So,
No.
okay. Hang on 1 second.
I think I can see it.
Oh. Can everybody see it now?
Yeah, it's just on the YouTube page, isn't it?
Oh, no, hang on. Can you see that?
You just need to go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Oh. So it's
Perfect.
okay, hang on, but then hang on. I just need to... Yeah, okay, we're good. Okay, right.
We can see your presenter mode now.
Oh, no.
Oh, oh,
You
no.
were doing really well.
I know. Hang on. Oh, this is... Can you still see it?
Yeah.
Hang on. Oh, Oh, hang on, it's just stopped me from sharing altogether. I'm sorry about this. This is right. I was doing so well, wasn't I? I thought, oh, I've nailed this. Okay, right, let's try again. Is it sharing now, my screen?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and then okay.
Yeah. Working.
Okay, can you see presenter view or not?
No, we can
Just go to next slide.
Okay, brilliant. All right. Okay, so basically, I just wanted to say about that video. Yeah, so you know, that kind of destruction, essentially, it leads to a really fragmented habitat. And once you get those scars within the seagrass, it allows for increased erosion on the edges of the seagrass beds, which basically leads to more destruction. And you could see the amount of sediment coming up and being disturbed, and reduces the light and the availability to photosynthesize. So when you've got that activity going on, you know, a lot of activity like that going on, then it's the ability for it to restore is very limited, really. Right, next slide. Okay, eutrophication. So this usually happens from fertilizer runoff and sewage, causing algal blooms that block the necessary sunlight. Sorry, Janet's just saying, will damage be caused by sea power? Sorry, I don't quite know what you, oh, by using sea power. Maybe at the end, Janet, if you could ask that question, and yeah, I'll just figure out exactly what you mean by that, and that would be, we'll do questions at the end. That would be great. So yeah, so eutrophication basically causes these algal blooms, and you can see from this photo here that there's this sort of filamentous algae that is growing. And also the sediment that washes into the water from agricultural land or land around can also damage the seagrass beds by smothering the seagrass and blocking out sunlight. And there was a study done by Surfers Against Sewage this year that found that there was, along the English and Welsh coast, there was raw sewage dumped into the sea nearly 3,000 times in the last year. So again, you know, poor water quality in that sense, it would be very difficult for seagrass to recover, really. Harvesting isn't something that we do in this country now because seagrass is protected. But this photo is actually from Japan, and you can see this chap has a specialized rake for harvesting seagrass, and the stuff that he's harvesting here is Zostra marina, so that is the eelgrass that we have here, and it was taken in 1986. This photo. Historically, seagrass would have been harvested for thatched roofs and packaging, and in the early 20th century, it was actually harvested for mattresses. So in the First World War, the French forces used mattresses stuffed with seagrass, and it is still used as a fertilizer in some places around the world. Overfishing. So the removal of fish, this is quite an interesting one. The removal of fish actually disrupts the important components of the food web. So when large predators are removed, the intermediate predators can become more abundant, and they in turn cause the decline of the smaller organisms because they're eating the smaller ones, and that keep the blades of the seagrass clean. So, you know, when we think back to the earlier slide, the close-up of the seagrass blade, all of those, you know, they're all really important for keeping those blades clean so that they can photosynthesize. And in the Baltic Sea, there was the disappearance of cod due to overfishing actually led to a corresponding increase in smaller fish and crustaceans, which led to the limited grazing of the invertebrates, so the tiny little things grazing on the blades of the seagrass. And that actually resulted in seagrass decline. So there was quite a strong link there that was seen, and it's similar to the wolves in Yellowstone, really. You know, when they were removed, the top predator just altering the entire ecosystem. And climate change, and I couldn't actually find a photo of climate change affecting seagrass. So instead, you've got quite a nice photo of some very healthy looking seagrass and some sun shining on it. But we have to, we have to touch on climate change, because episodes of warmer sea temperature have been known to damage seagrass. So seawater temperature actually affects how enzymes and metabolism work, and they influence how organisms grow. So rising water temperatures tend to increase rates of seagrass respiration, so that's using up oxygen, faster than the rates of photosynthesis, which is producing the oxygen. And it makes the seagrass more susceptible to grazing by herbivores. And then the increased temperature also increases the requirements for the amount of light. And so it influences how quickly the seagrass can take up their nutrients in their environment, and it can make seagrass more susceptible to disease. And there have been large eelgrass, the Zostra marina declines have been observed in Chesapeake Bay, which is on the east coast of the United States. In years where the water temperature has persisted for several days above 30 degrees C. So that is really the thermal limit for this species. And invasive species. So another nice photo of a very pretty looking seaweed. It almost looks a bit like a fern, and that's the reason why it's really commonly been used in aquariums. However, once it's established on the seabed, it can quickly turn into this. So it's nicknamed the killer algae, and it was released into the Mediterranean in the 1980s by an aquarium, basically. And by 2000, by the year 2000, it covered more than 50 square miles of the Mediterranean coastline. And it overgrew and replaced a lot of the native Neptune seagrass. And it massively reduced the ecosystem's biodiversity. And since then, it's been found in California and in southwestern Australia. And they've introduced these eradication programs to control it. But essentially, the eradication programs consist of putting a big tarpaulin over the top of it and then pumping a load of chlorine down a tube underneath it to kill it all off, which it works, but obviously there's a lot of other wildlife which it affects as well, but such is the world of conservation. So moving on to disease. So disease could be considered natural and human, you know, both, and I'll explain a bit more. So in the early 1930s, there was a massive die-off of seagrass, so up to 90% of all eelgrass, so the Zostra marina, growing in temperate North America and Europe. And it was attributed to a wasting disease. So it was a bit like the bubonic plague of seagrasses, basically. The die-off was so severe that it actually resulted in a small snail that was specialised to live on eelgrass, completely went extinct during this episode. And it's caused by a slime mould, which affects eelgrass populations in the Atlantic. And it has actually contributed to some recent losses, but none of them have been as catastrophic as the 1930s. So as you can see from the photo here, it darkens the blade. It causes these blacky browny spots, and they spread all along the blades, and they destroy the cells, and it stops it from photosynthesizing, and eventually it kills off the grass. It's really infectious, so blades that aren't touching can pick it up, so it obviously moves through the water column. But the really interesting thing about this is that it doesn't always trigger deadly outbreaks. So not all strains of the slime mold disease can cause this death within the eelgrass. And some populations of eelgrass are actually better; they're able to resist it better. And it's still a bit of a mystery why some eelgrass falls victim to it and others doesn't. But one theory is that the slime mold is actually a secondary decomposer of old deteriorating leaves, and actually healthy seagrass plants are able to resist, to fight off the mold and make it stay healthy, but unhealthy plants become susceptible. So it could be a really good indicator of how healthy a seagrass bed is. So brilliant. We're on to the hope bit, which is good. So this is basically it's an article in the Guardian, and it's about a project called Project Seagrass, and it's aiming the project is aiming to restore 30 kilometres squared of seagrass across the UK by 2030. So it's got a few sites that it's currently working on. There's two sites are monitoring sites. There's the Isles of Scilly, and then there's Porthdin Llyn in North Wales as well. And then the third site, they're actually doing a bit of underwater gardening, and this is at Dale in Pembrokeshire. And here they've planted 2 hectares of seagrass using nearly 1 million seeds, so it's quite impressive. The process of restoring the seagrass started last summer, and basically a team of snorkelers, all volunteers and divers, they went collecting the seeds from existing meadows, and you can see the top left photo on this slide. You can see this is them harvesting the seeds, so the tiny little seagrass seeds, and they harvested actually quite a lot of them from Porthdin Llyn. The seeds were then cultivated at Swansea University, and around 2,000 volunteers then basically helped to prepare these small sand-filled Hessian sacks. So you can see that in the middle photo there. And so each one of these little bags is tied in a metre intervals to a long length of rope, and then that helps to secure them to the sea floor. And just before planting, so each one of the sacks had a scoop of seeds added to it, and in total there was 15 kilometres of rope that was dropped into the bay at Dale Head from a little boat. And then over time, all of these materials, so the Hessian and the rope, will naturally and safely disintegrate, and it will just leave these seagrass seedlings to take root and grow. And so the reason why they've chosen this site at Dale in Pembrokeshire is because historically it has had seagrass, so it's lost seagrass from the bay, but essentially it has the right conditions for it to survive. And so this is kind of the first in what's hopefully going to be quite a few locations where they're restoring seagrass beds. And another thing that really gives us hope is this project, which is, I mentioned it earlier actually, it's Chesapeake Bay on the east coast of the US. This was a restoration project which restored the same eelgrass as we're restoring in Dale, so there's Ostra marina. And the reason why it declined so much here was again because of this wasting disease from the 1930s, and then a series of poor weather bouts, and then also the impact of fertiliser runoff from the surrounding land completely destroyed pretty much all of the seagrass beds that were at Chesapeake Bay. And along with the total loss of the habitat went a lot of the wildlife, so the brant goose, and there was a commercially valuable fishery, the bay scallop, that completely was gone from the bay as well. And so for over 70 years, eelgrass wasn't documented in the coastal lagoons here at all. Even though populations around the world after the 1930s were able to recover a bit, it didn't here. And so they got a bit of a handle of the fertiliser runoff, so the water quality was cleaner. And monitoring eventually showed that wasn't an issue anymore. So the environmental conditions weren't degraded to a point where seagrass couldn't grow, but it was actually the fact that there just wasn't enough seed recruitment, i.e. there was a couple of very small patches of seagrass which were found a bit further out, and they were less than 2 meters squared, but it just wasn't enough to kickstart the seeding and restoration process. And so basically they established a seed-based restoration program in 2001, and it resulted in a rapid recovery of the eelgrass habitat, and the result was this. So you can see in 2001 there's really very sparse, maybe a couple of patches of seagrass, but moving on to 2018 there's some very large areas of very dense seagrass, and so basically what they found was that the results suggested that the efforts to improve water quality and restore and protect seagrass actually creates this ecological chain reaction. So clearer and cleaner water actually promotes seagrass growth, which further improves water quality and expansion of even more seagrass. So believe it or not, seagrass seeding actually only occurred over 6% of the total area of restored seagrass. So really not that very much. And it shows that just given a bit of a helping hand, the seagrass has been able to restore itself. And as a result of this, a lot of wildlife, much wildlife has returned to the seagrass beds. So waterfowl and waders. So this duck at the front right is a redhead duck, and it feeds on eelgrass. And the numbers of these ducks have grown. They've recovered in line with the seagrass recovery. So they went from 900 individuals of redheads in the mid-1980s to around 30,000 in 2018, which just goes to show how healthy the seagrass beds must be, because it's going to have to cope with the grazing of the increased wildlife as well. So it's obviously able to cope with that. So fish and crustaceans, mollusks are all abundant in the bay. This is a blue crab, and this is famous. So Chesapeake Bay is famous for this blue crab. And it also supports 4 species of turtle. And this here is a loggerhead turtle. It's the most common. And it's a carnivore. It feeds on crustaceans and jellyfish and invertebrates, but it also feeds on the seagrass too, and lives within the seagrass bed. And also a reintroduction of the bay scallop is now underway, and that's been underway since 2008, and those numbers are increasing, and they've actually found that the bay scallops have been found in some clam beds which are more than 20 miles away from where they set out the spawning cages. So that suggests that there's now natural dispersal of the larvae by a current. So some really positive things have come from this restoration project in Chesapeake Bay, and it's it isn't just as simple as that in 20 years time our seagrass beds around Wales and the UK will be restored. There's a lot of factors, there's a lot of feedback loops involved, but it definitely gives us hope. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens at Dale and at the other restoration locations that Project Seagrass are looking into as well. And if you want to get involved and do your citizen science bit, then this here is the Seagrass spotter. So this again is part of Project Seagrass, and it goes through how to identify and upload photos of seagrass, and you can have a look and see where seagrass is closest to you. So it's a really interesting, it's a really useful tool to have a look at and see where seagrass is growing, and see if you can add to this and go and find a patch yourself. One of the main challenges that seagrass faces is the fact that there is a real lack of spatial data, and so the more people that can get involved and engage with this mapping and pinpointing the seagrass, the better, really. And that's it. So back to this lovely photo of the spiny seahorse once again. Thank you to Jeff and Penny and the Anglesey Branch. And I hope that I've basically helped to give you a bit of an insight into seagrass. It is an amazing habitat, and there's certainly a lot more to learn about it. But I will. I'll take any questions now. I can then stop this share. There we go.
Eve, thanks so much for that. Are you able to field questions from the chat?
Yes, I can.
Great.
Let's have a little look. So I'm just having to go up. Sorry, marine energy. So Janet's asked, will damage be caused by using marine energy? That's probably quite a difficult one. I don't know how to answer that one, really. I guess it depends how close it is to seagrass beds. Potentially, yes. Like I said, it is protected, so there shouldn't really be any sites being placed in a seagrass bed, and it is quite close to shore, whereas a lot of wind farms and things will be further out. So, but it's kind of hard to pinpoint actually how much, but the sea is very connected, and it'd be difficult to say. You couldn't say no, it won't be affected, because the interconnectedness of everything, and the sea is I'm sorry, I can't answer that one very well. Yeah, I hope that helped a little bit anyway. There's one saying, is there any on the Yorkshire coast? There are patches of seagrass over on the East coast. I would go onto the seagrass spotter, because you can see there where there are patches of seagrass on the East coast. But there certainly are over on the East coast. I'm not exactly sure if there's any in Yorkshire. Sorry, I'm just reading this one. So, Astra angustifolia is recorded as common in the Brackish Fleet Lagoon behind Chesil Beach in Dorset, where I used to study ostracod specimens and other habitats in that location. Do you get these similar brackish zostriforms at Kemlyn? I don't know, actually. I've been snorkeling in Kemlyn, but I've not actually seen any seagrass at Kemlyn. So again, maybe that's something to check on the seagrass spotter and see if there's any on there. So thank yous. You showed locations on Anglesey. Are you able to say where? Again, that's something maybe to check on the seagrass. Hang on one second. Let me just go back to the presentation and just have a little look. There are locations on Anglesey. Yes, the Inland Sea and Roscollin. So Yeah, Roscollin, there's some seagrass at Roscollin and the Inland Sea. So they were the places that were documented in 2019. But again, Seagrass Spotter might have updated if, you know, people might have put their own photos. Great talk. I'm worried about my anchor now. Is there any guidance for leisure boaters? I mean, it's about knowing where the seagrass beds are, and that's all that I suppose that's all we can do really is you know, educate ourselves in where the locations of seagrass are, and then, you know, be really conscious of where we're dropping anchors, because yeah, you know, it is, you can't see what's going on beneath the surface of the water when you're in a boat, so it's nobody's going to tell you exactly where the locations are. That's something that you'd have to find out yourself. But yeah, that's a really good point. Any boaters out there dropping anchors, then maybe look to see where there are seagrass beds, and try and avoid dropping anchors there. How are the flowers fertilized? So yeah, so they pollinate. They pollinate and they're fertilized underwater. Some of it is through currents, but they can fertilize. They can fertilize by pollen attaching to marine creatures as well. So that is another way. But they do also clone. They have the ability to clone as well. And it's thought that that some seagrass beds have cloned. You know, they've basically cloned over hundreds and potentially thousands of years, and just through cloning they've created these really large expanses. So they pollinate, but then they so they reproduce asexually and sexually. What is the current limitation to expanding the seagrass project in Wales? I guess it's probably COVID will have put a big halt to things, I imagine. It's there's been a lot of volunteers. You know, the project at Dale, you know, there was a lot of people involved in that project, and obviously they've got to collect the seeds, and that takes a lot of time. That's got to be done by people that dive. Most of the people that dive are volunteers. So, you know, although this could be a really successful thing that happens at Dale, there's a lot of people and a lot of hard work involved in it, and I guess that's probably the main limitation I would have said. Sorry, I'm just reading through the questions.
Eve, I think we may be straying beyond the time that you.
Oh, we are. Yeah, no, you're right. Actually, we might have to. Might have to say
have to call a halt.
Yeah, no, you're right, Jeff. I think if anybody's got any burning questions, then please feel free to email me, and you can find my email on the North Wales Wildlife Trust website.
Fine. Yeah. Thanks very much, Eve. That's an excellent account of the breadth of interest that there really is attached to seagrass. It illustrates a great variety of benefits to marine ecosystems generally, and of course, ultimately to us, as you showed very well. The two things that struck home to me were the richness of the zooids on the surface of the grass leaves, and also the amount of material in suspension, which I guess would have been a lot of it would have been food for other organisms, even in clear water, quite a thick layer of a thick area of water amongst the seagrass fronds that was heavy with suspended material. Thank you very much indeed. I think that's an excellent account, as I say, and it shows, I think towards the end there, you were showing the rehabilitation areas. It does show that while it's very vulnerable perhaps to the sorts of disturbance that you showed, nonetheless, to me, that was a surprising level of resilience and recovery that seagrass is able to show. So, as you said, perhaps there's good hope for the future in the restoration of seagrass beds very widely, both here and, of course, in the tropics. where so much benefit would come from. Thank you very much indeed, Eve.
Thanks, Jeff.
If anybody would like to donate, then I think you were going to put a link on the chat.
I will do. Yes, I'll just put that
people
now.
would be able to make a donation if to show the appreciation.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.